Hey, welcome to the newest episode of the Articulate Ox podcast. I am your host, Soma79. Thank you so much for joining us today. My guest is Donald Gerolamo, aka Salem Weather. He is a photographer that I have known for quite some time. He works in the Salem, Massachusetts area where a lot of his photographs are from. So if you go check out Salem Weather on Instagram, you will not be disappointed about what you found. I don't know if I said this in the interview or maybe I put it in a post, but Donnie takes these photographs that sort of they sum up everything that the outside world kind of thinks of New England as, but also everything that people who live in New England really know it as. He somehow combines those both into one image, and I think it's satisfying for both audiences. And I absolutely love his work. It is beautiful. You should definitely check it out. Hit him up for prints, and yeah, it would go beautifully on no matter what wall you got. So thank you so much, Donnie. Check out at Salem Weather on Instagram, and hope you enjoy the episode. Peace. Hey, welcome to the newest episode of the Articulate Ox podcast, number 20 something. Who really knows? I am your host, Soma79. My host today is Salem Weather on Instagram, Donald Gerolamo. How are you doing today?
Very good, Tim. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I should have mentioned you're a photographer. I forgot to work that into my first sentence, It's
Yeah,
amateur hour over here at the Somadrome.
it's funny. I guess I am a photographer. I never look at myself as I feel like I'm self-taught. Well, a little bit. We can get into that too. I'm self-taught, though I've learned from people. And whenever somebody called me that, like early on, I'd be like, I'm not really I just take pictures. But I guess like anybody who takes
Yeah.
a photo that's nice and people like is a photographer. So yeah.
That's fun. It's something that comes up a lot on the podcast. We talk about like the importance of taking your own art seriously. It's like, oh yeah, I'm an art. It's like the bar is. I posted something on my Instagram recently that just said art is whatever you can get away with, which I think is true. And the bar for being an artist is actually pretty low. So I would encourage everybody to just claim it. It's.
I agree. Yeah, because some people are like, "Oh, you're an artist," and I'm like, "I am." Like, I guess. I get. I don't know. I guess. I think. I definitely see photographers as artists, but like I think that's just part of my own issues. And like I don't have the confidence to call myself that. Yet I put effort into what I do, and I do feel like there's an art to it. I just
Yeah.
don't like calling myself anything. But
Well,
yeah,
just know
so
I have the confidence to call you an artist. So
thank
take
you.
that for what it's worth. Because these photographs I'm looking at are beautiful. Like, and you take a lot of photos around Salem, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And actually, I'm going to show one here this has been, so I've been working from home the past few years, which I do permanently, but I've only been to my office once in the past 3 years, and this picture was hanging up there. So I just recently got this back after not seeing it for a while. It was hanging on my desk in my office. This is House of the Seven Gables. Is that right? Or
Yep, House of Seven
yep,
Gables.
Salem, Mass. I'm gonna
From
see if I can just. The light is gonna mess me up to
yeah,
hold it
it's
like
okay.
that.
Yeah, it's a
So there was a story, but how did you take this photo? Because I rember you telling me you did
it's a
something
high
funky.
dynamic range photo, meaning I took it's three shots, one over the other. Um, it helps bring out like detail. You take like an overexposed shot, an underexposed shot, and then like around a properly exposed shot. And then in that one, I removed all the color except yellow because the lights were on and it was like sort of evening.
Mhm.
And so some like the overexposed shot was probably over a second, which is like a long exposure. And then yeah, I really liked just the glowing windows, and that angle is the coolest angle. You can see all of the gables that you really need to see from like when you enter this place. It's basically a museum. From the other side, it's not as cool looking, and then this cool old dead tree, which I think has been cut down since. Just kind of added to it, so I like that.
Yeah. So you took three photos, like the tripod in the exact same spot.
Yeah,
So all right,
yeah.
so that's something that, and I know this might be something that anyone who takes photographs knows. How, like for me, like an approximate artist. It's hard for me to just do the same thing. Like how hard is it to get those that are going to line up perfectly?
Well, if you have a good tripod, it's not that difficult. When I first started doing, like, I learned about it, I was like, oh, this is really neat. You see these like amazing photos that look almost otherworldly, kind of surreal, like so much detail. It's almost impossible to get with like a single frame. So
Hmm.
I started taking those. I don't do that as much anymore unless I see something like that. It's not really that difficult. As you uh, just have a decent tripod and use a remote. I had to use a remote or a timer because the slightest little movement on the camera
He's
kind of
gonna
shifts.
totally mess it up.
I
Yeah.
just did it with a remote. It wasn't very windy, which was good. So
Yeah, and that is something to consider. I was here shooting yesterday some footage for a film I'm working on for this album I made. And we were just talking about how the most important thing, like if you get one thing right, you have to get the small little production elements right. Because
yeah,
it's like we're using a green screen. I'm like, if we misdo this, everything is shot.
right, right.
And it's just like those little details are what end up being the things that waste all your time. Like, you know, when you get home and there was a hair on the lens or something like
Well,
that.
yeah, well, that's so I always try to keep my equipment clean. That's another thing. Yeah, like I always my sensor I clean, once a month or whatever. I haven't been great about it lately, but because dust gets in there and keep the lenses super clean. And then that shot, like a really good photographer never really has to crop. I think I had to crop that one a little because there was like a sign on that road. I didn't want anything real
Yeah.
modern looking
Yeah.
in it. So I kind of cropped out. There's like a little like street sign or like do not park sign. But I like just trying to get everything in camera as much as possible. Like I don't I think there's an art to editing for sure. I'm just not very good at it. So like when I say, when it's a high dynamic range photo, it's like the software does a lot of the work, but I have to know how to, what
Right.
photos to take to get it right. So the software does a lot of the work, and then I just removed color. Really, I didn't do much else.
But it does look beautiful. I mean, the way the yellow, the mind kind of fills in, kind of turns some of the gray in the top right corner, fills it in a little blue to counteract the yellow, and it works. The shading is perfect. The choice of what color to accentuate and how bright to do it is quite elegant on the paint. I love that.
Yeah, I will actually. It's funny when we were texting earlier and you sent it like, oh, I've got this on my desk. I'm like, oh, I like forget about these. I'm like, that's probably one of my favorite shots.
Yeah.
We're taking in Salem because it's one of those. It's like well, maybe people don't know, but the House of Seven Gables is in Salem. It kind of represents kind of the history of Salem and things like
It's funny
that.
you
So,
mentioned that. I have a Jeopardy word a day calendar here, and I always take the old ones and like make notes while I'm doing an episode. And the one I happened to grab, the question was, the answer is his story began in Salem, Massachusetts in 1804 and ended 60 years later during a trip to New Hampshire with Franklin Pierce.
nice,
So it is
Hawthorne.
Nathaniel Hawthorne. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
oddly
Because
ironic.
what's cool, so right next to I mean, I know we're kind of going off here, but
That's fine.
anyway, thinking about right next to the House of the Seven Gables is Nathaniel Hawthorne's birthplace, and they like moved it there. So it's like there's a couple of cool historic. They
Like they
moved it,
literally moved the house.
yeah, from somewhere else in Salem, like down
Okay.
the street, like to preserve it. So they put it on the land that's like right next to the House of the Seven Gables, but it's not really where he was born. I forget where it is. But then you can go. He worked as he had like an office job at like the port, and you can see that like down the street. It's kind of cool. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous area. I mean, I
Yeah,
love going down there. It's a great the Salem Art Museum is also just fantastic. I don't know if that
yeah,
is that what they call it. I saw a George O'Keeffe exhibit there. I guess now it's been a couple years, like
yeah. The
5 years,
PBS
something like that.
really, really nice. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And the first thing I'll tell you in Salem is no witches were ever burned there. Isn't that true? That it's like they were all hung, but everybody thinks that they were burned. Right.
yeah. I don't know if they ever burned anybody there, but Salem back in the day was much bigger, and it encompassed like towns, surrounding towns like Danvers, and like so. There's other play. I'm not
At the
like
Salem historian.
on top of that history, but there are things I love about what they've done with. the they have like the witch memorial, which is pretty amazing. There, it's right next to the cemetery called, forgive me if I'm wrong, I think it's called Old Burying Point, Old Salem Burying Point or something. It's right in the middle of town. It's right next to the PBS Essex Museum, and there's a little section right next to it, and it's got granite walls, and out of the granite walls, it almost looks like little benches stick out, and there's 19 of them for the 19 people who they killed, or are accused of witchcraft and all this. And on each one of them is their name and the date that they died, or were killed by the state or the government. So, what's really beautiful about it is at the end of it, the wall, it looks like it's been removed in steps, and there's just like a metal fence, and past that metal fence is the old burying point. And so when these people who were accused of witchcraft were killed, they weren't allowed to be buried in a cemetery. So their families would have to sneak in at night and take their bodies, and so they were buried privately in their at their homes or something, if even they were able to get their bodies. But at the end, you can see into the old burying point, and that is symbolic because a lot of the accusers are buried there. So it's meant to be so they can forever be looking at what they did.
Oh my
And,
God.
and there are, I think, 6 or 8, I forget what the type of tree is, but they're planted along where these stone benches are. And it's the trees that they had hung some of them from. It's the type of tree that they had hung them from. It's like really symbolic. It's like
That's
really,
wild.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. The only reason I know that is I was walking around one night taking photos, and there was a Salem University like professor guiding his class, and I listened to him, and he like gave a whole history lesson. It was kind of
I
cool.
hope you tipped him at the end of that.
Yeah, I was like, wow. Yeah,
So your Instagram account, Salem Weather, it's been around for a few years. You got some pretty decent response to this, if I remember correctly. I believe there was your identity was hidden for some time.
yeah.
What's the
When I
story behind it?
yeah when I first did it, so for years I had, like we were talking about earlier, like I never had like fancied myself an artist or a photographer or whatever, but I had this kind of need to do something creative. I needed a creative outlet, and I'd always loved looking at photography, taking photos with I never had like a real camera, but those disposable thing. I'd go around, take photos, get them developed, be like, oh, that's kind of cool. Never knew what I was doing. Um, so then, Instagram had been out for a few years. I didn't have an account. And well, I think, I did have an account just for my cat. I was taking photos of my cat at the time, but I wanted to do something a little more creative, and I set up the account just to have a place to save the good shots. If I had a good shot, I thought it was nice. So set up the account. I called it Salem Weather just because I had been going out at the time I was like a pretty serious runner. I was going out every day, and weather was an important thing to me. So I checked the weather. I run in any weather, but I was like, oh,
That's fair. Yeah.
I'll be like a weather reporter to the town. Be like, oh, this is the weather. Like you could look out the window. It doesn't matter. It was just a gimmick.
Yeah.
And so literally my first few shots were like, it was like, oh, here's the lighthouse, and here's the temp today, and this is what we're looking at. And it was like the first, I don't know, couple weeks I did that, and I was like, this is stupid. What am I doing? Nobody cares. So the name just stuck, and I kind of liked the name. And then I just started taking photos of what I liked in the area, historic, um, kind of landscape stuff. A lot of my photos, especially early on, don't have any people in them. Um, and I don't really know why I didn't use people in my photos at first, but then I liked these quiet, serene scenes.
Hmm.
Um, so that's how I started. And I didn't tell anybody because I really didn't know a lot of people in town. I mean, I had friends, but I had also, this is just part of the history of it. I had just got out of a long relationship, and so I was like kind of at the time like starting to make new friends and this and
Hmm.
that. And it's like, oh, I have this Instagram account because it just didn't really matter to me, but I started following all local businesses and things like that, and it kind of blew up a little bit. I think I still have a couple thousand followers, which was for me. I was like, wow, this is great, you know. And so, but also what really helped was I took photos every day. That was part of my thing. The photo, I if I would take photos that day, it would be posted. So every photo I took, I think for 2 years straight, if if it's posted that day, I took it that day. So it was like it got busy because I was some days, you know, um, and I was traveling a little bit for work, so I would have to. Not every photo could be taken exactly that day, so I'd have to like kind of like have a few
Yeah.
to post as I was traveling. But like if I knew I was going to be busy that night, I'd get up at like 5 a.m., go get the sunrise, run home, get on the computer, edit, post, and leave, or wait to post at the end of the day or something, just to like have one to put up. So that's what I did for a while, and it was just something I did that kind of kept me in a good mood, really.
Right.
I
I did a
wasn't,
similar thing in 2015 where I drew a portrait every day for a year. And
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
and I think what you did may have been partially inspired me. I know when I had another friend, Trespassing, who may be coming up in a future episode, who his thing is he takes pictures in like abandoned places, like essentially places you have to trespass to get to.
I've seen that.
And
You shared that with me. Those are amazing.
yeah, they're great. And so he really inspired me too to do the thing every day. And that's a really great practice for anybody that like it's hard to like you talk about calling yourself an artist. If you sit down and if you take an actual measured photograph you plan to share every day for a year or do a portrait every day for a year, it's really hard not to call yourself an artist at the end of that. Because it's like and it's like part of it is I think I've said before that I learned everything I was going to learn about drawing portraits within like 4 months. But I think I took me the full year to learn the discipline that I learned from drawing a portrait every day, where then it just became part of your everyday activity of just doing some sort of art, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting too because that's it got to the point where I was like, oh, I feel like I've taken this photo before. Let me try something different. It would kind of just force me to go to different places too.
Right.
I'm not too adventurous. I'm like a home, but when I'm home because like I get very busy.
Same as
But
me. Yeah.
it forced me to get out, learn more about my town. Even when I was like a runner, a serious run, I'd run everywhere. That was helpful too because I would see things and I'd be like, oh, I want to go back at golden hour and take a photo of
Right.
that. I've never seen that before in this light or something like that. And so I'd run, I'd see things, but it was time consuming because then after a while, I'm like, some of these are okay. I was like kind of pleased with myself,
It should
but
be.
right. But then I'd get very. I'd take a few photos. And I'd be like, oh, these are bad. But then I realized none of like I was just trying to show the city for a
Mhm.
while, and then I was just trying to show it the way I saw it. You know what I mean? And like just the places that I like. I think that's why I had no people in them because I don't think I'm really a people person.
It's
I think
funny. It's funny you
I
mentioned that
love.
because I have your Instagram account up on my screen over here, and I was thinking about how we all have everybody a lot of people have been to Salem, a lot of people go during Halloween, and a lot of people have a certain perception of what Salem looks like. But you capture a different side of the city. It feels there's and I think that may be why it appeals to people who live there because they see the different side of the city. Like the photographs we see as beautiful. I mean, this is one of the most beautiful photographs I've ever taken of this before, but it's also one of the most photographed parts of Salem. It's like this is what people
Sure.
think of. So like when I think the locals probably really like, see an appeal to seeing the Salem that they see every day.
Yeah.
And you find, and it's like for me, I always think of Salem as a place where unfortunately it's hard to find a parking spot, and there's also been a lot of people going around. The version of Salem I see in your photos is the one that I sort of want to visit. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, 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 yeah. That's interesting. You say that, yeah, because these were the times of day or times of year where there just weren't people around, and
right,
then I realized sometimes a landscape or a building is boring, and just a person in it just walking by or doing so just kind of brings it to life. So there's some you'll see like if you were to like look at all the photos through, you see like I started integrating just like animals, like a cat would walk by or a dog, and
In this
then
one, the one I really love that I might talk to you about a print for is the Joe's Hair Salon with a guy
okay,
doing a wheelie.
that
That's a
just
beautiful photo, and I think it works really well with the seafood one. Like you can really see those hanging next to each other.
yeah, I love that you brought that up. Okay, so that shot that's perfect example. Uh, for years, that storefront of that salon just I don't know what it was. Maybe it's the funky looking painting of the people on the front that
Yeah,
you know,
it's
windows.
perfectly kitsch in a way.
Yeah, it's very kitsch, very just like I always wanted to take one of those almost Wes Anderson type photos of that, just like dead on, you know.
Yes.
I tried for years. It's funny, like I've been taking a photo of that building since like 2016, and it just never worked. And one day I was walking by, and it was like decent light, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try this again. And I look to my right, and I see this kid on a bike coming. So I take a couple photos, and I see him coming. I'm like, this kid's gonna be in my shot. And he saw me.
Yep. The look on his face now that I'm zooming in is great.
And this wasn't like set up. I wasn't like, hey, do something. He saw me, pulled a wheelie, and I got lucky. And I remember as I saw him, I was like, oh, I'm gonna slow the shutter just enough that he looks like he's moving. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't freeze him, and I just got it right. And he pulled the wheelie, and I got it. And he stopped and apologized after he passed. I go, no, dude, you just made the shot. Like that's it. And I was like, oh, this is what it's about. That's like I feel like that's my only real street photography shot. Like I love reading about like street photographers from the 50s, 60s, 70s, you know. And like you gotta have like real balls to do that stuff when like there's people involved because not everybody
Right, right. Because the reaction that kid have is the opposite of what most people are
yeah,
going to
and
have.
that was
I
part
found.
he was doing it to be goofy because he saw me with a
Right.
light. But I was like, this that made the photo.
Well, it also speaks to the thing about photography that I think a lot of people who don't take photographs, or at least don't take them with an artistic intent, realize that it's like sometimes the moment that you need to capture it only lasts like a fraction of a second,
Yeah.
and
Right. Yeah.
it's not they literally it really is about capturing a moment in time because it's never going to be exactly like that again, and you can lose. So many people have lost the perfect shot like just by like a hair. You
Mhm.
know.
Oh yeah, I've been there. It's like a lot. I jump around a lot, but a lot of what I like to do now is photos of the moon, and you'll see like in my
Mhm. They're beautiful.
it's
Yeah.
always like love photos of the moon, and like you only have a few minutes a month if the weather's good. There's
Right.
only a couple
Right.
minutes where you can like the way I like to catch. I like to catch it as close to the horizon as I can, and then because then it just looks huge. I love that. Like it's if you I do a lot of planning for those shots because I know, oh, the moon's going to rise in a certain area and blah blah blah. And I want it between these two things or coming up behind this because that gives it some sort of life, I guess. But it's the challenge of getting it exactly where you want it.
Yeah. This one, the most recent one you have posted now of the moon, right, like sort of dead center between those two towers,
So
is
that's
just
was
gorgeous.
I'm looking at it too. Yeah. Okay. So that was the end of okay. That I've been so that is Thatcher Island in Rockport, and those lighthouses they're aligned exactly north to south, and they're really cool. They're very tall. I forget exactly how high, but they're old. They're some of the oldest lighthouses in the United States. They're built by the British, and I've been trying to get that shot um, for a very long time. I go up there a lot because for some reason, I just love. I have photos of the moon going behind both of those, the north and the south lighthouse, but never right in between. And that day, I was like, oh, I thought I was gonna because you can't tell sometimes where the
Right.
cloud
How is
is,
yeah.
and it just came up, and I got it, and I love it.
I like how the moon kind of looks like a cackling Pac-Man.
Yeah. It does. It's like
Is it cool if if when I edit this down, if I put some of the photos up on the
oh yeah,
screen?
yeah.
All right,
Oh,
cool.
go
I
ahead.
just want to, yeah, because I think
Yeah,
it really helps. The one thing I love about this is I just recently joined this minimalist photography group on Facebook, and every other comment is debating whether the photographs people post are actually minimalist or not. And it's like you can't. It's just like
how do you? Well, and I love minimalist stuff too, I feel like a lot of my more recent stuff is fairly, some of
It,
it
it
is.
is. It's like it's wouldn't. I mean, according to the debate in that group, I think they would probably say no. But it has like considering for what you're shooting in a city,
Yeah,
it does. It evokes some of the things that are great about minimalism.
yeah, yeah. I know.
It's point. They're like pointed. That's It's yeah. There's a clear point of how to look at your photos. Like they follow these really beautiful lines that I don't know. I
I
mean,
appreciate it. I do,
yeah.
because that's okay. So that's something, before I started really learning about photography, I didn't understand. I didn't know what a leading line was. I'd always heard of rule of thirds, and I was like, I always wanted to know what it was, but never bothered to look it up. And then, so, so I did this for a couple of years, right? So I'm taking the photos, and my first, I don't know, 6 months of photos was just with a phone, an iPhone, because it was like, I was like, this takes decent photos,
Yeah,
and
and that's what I found too. Is I when I was shooting footage yesterday, I had my iPhone taping right next to my regular like nice camera, and they're
it's
comparable.
it's pretty, especially video now, and those things are amazing. But anyway, I was
Yeah.
taking some great photos with it, I thought, and just editing it in the little iPhone edit thing, right? And that was it. That's all I did. So very
Mhm.
plain. And then I was like, all right, I've been doing this for months. Why don't I buy a camera? So, not knowing a lot, looked a little bit into it, ended up buying an Icon, whatever. It was like it wasn't a full frame, but whatever. It was great. And I was like, wow, I could finally like get different lenses. And so I was all
Mhm.
excited about it. Like experimenting with that. And the photos were just way more high quality. And then all of a sudden I needed editing software. So I get Lightroom.
Yeah.
And
Adobe Lightroom. Yep.
yeah, Adobe Lightroom, and that came with, what's the other Adobe stuff? I don't use it that much.
Yeah. I'm gonna do. I have the entire Adobe Creative Cloud, and I don't. I'm not gonna show for them, but I'm gonna show for them and say I love it, and it's amazing.
So what's nice is like So Lightroom is basically like, if you take a photo with a DSLR, or a mirrorless, um, you have there's like layers of data in those photos that you can adjust color, light to a point, but like you can't like move stuff around in it. Like it's not. I didn't want to get over, and I think there's an art to that. There's no offense to people who like place stuff in photos and all that, because it's some of my photos do have that where I like enlarged the moon. That was
Right.
really, I like everything I do to be in camera. So
Mhm.
like nothing is physically changed other than you brighten the shadows, or if something's a little bit too bright, you bring
Right.
it down a bit, add a little bit of contrast. So that's what I try to do, um, now. But it's amazing what you can do with these like fairly affordable cameras.
Yeah.
You know,
Even
like
we were talking yesterday when we were setting the lights for my shoot that my friend Pilsy, who was here helping me, and he had the same experience as me. He's like, "Look, I got this light kit for like $150, and it's
yeah,
amazing." And like I mean, I set up a green screen in my basement. I got a cheap light kit, and it's just for almost nothing.
yeah.
The investment is almost nothing these days to really do this
And
stuff.
yeah, and then you end up getting obsessed, and I got
Right.
obsessed. Now I have all kinds of crazy stuff that
That's because
like
the first one's always free because it's like they get you for almost nothing in the first light kit. Then 6 months later, you're like dropping 2 grand on
yeah.
stuff that you're like, hanging from your ceiling.
So I've just been sort of like trading it, but it's funny, like when you get into this, you realize like once you choose a brand, like that's your brand,
Yeah.
because you have the lenses, the glass. You invest in glass. That's what my first photography teacher told me. He's like, "Are you investing in glass?" I'm like, I didn't know what he was
Like what?
saying.
What we
I'm like,
selling meth? What are we doing here? How do we fund this?
this guy might have been, by the way. I'll tell you. So now I've invested in glass. So I have some great lenses, because I like to do all different kinds. Like I'm not a street photographer. I'm not a landscape photographer. I just like doing all different kinds of stuff. So like I have like a super long lens that I love for the moon, and I'll go out now and I actually like taking photos of birds and stuff because there's a challenge to it.
Yeah.
Uh,
What's
but
fun about your photos, I'm thinking about this now, is these are photos that would look really artistic in like your regular home, but would feel really relaxing in your vacation home.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like they
I
sort of like give you both of those feelings. Like the context of where you put them, I think adds a little to them, but like they would fit. Like this one that you have, I mentioned before, the moon down the middle, that would look awesome over a fireplace.
yeah,
Like
I should
nice and big, like over a fireplace. That would look amazing.
I should print like I well that was another thing. I have a printer. Oh, I think you got the same printer.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm glad you have it because I'll be talking about prints after.
Okay. Because I should print more. Like I honestly I'm like looking on the living room. I don't have any of my own photos up, and I don't know what
Right.
that's about either. Um I because I
Is it
take
this is worth talking about because when I moved into my house a couple years ago, I hung up a lot of my paintings. You can see right now the Gambit's mine, the two over
yeah,
my
yeah.
shoulder are both mine. And I joke, I'm like, it feels like a museum sometimes. And
Well,
I'm like, and sometimes but it's like there's a part of me that's like, okay, am I just like, oh, look how great I am? Or is it that I'm just making the art that I would want to buy? So of course I want it in my house. And I think it's more of the latter for me, you know.
yeah. No, and I like like it like I think what happens is like sometimes you spend time with something that you make and then you're just like, okay, I'm done with this. What's the next thing?
Right.
And I don't know, for me, and then sometimes I love a photo I take and then I look at it later. I'm like, I don't really like that one anymore. But I should like, I don't know what that is, but I do like that one, that most recent one, which is months old. I really want to print that because of how long it took me to get that shot. Because I've been trying to get that shot for years. Because sometimes I go out for these shots for the moon. You got to choose a location, and once you're there, that's
You don't have
it.
time to move. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's you
you're
don't
not
get it.
tired.
Yeah.
You a little bit, but
Right.
like people don't understand is when like a shot like that, dead center between those two lighthouses. If I had moved 3 feet to the left, the moon would be that much off.
Right.
You really can't. There's you really don't have that much space to move. You have to be in the spot. You have to be within just a couple feet.
And on top of that, so sometimes people will mention how fast the Earth is actually moving, and it's like that doesn't really affect us on a regular basis until you're in a moment like that. We're like, oh yeah, I'm on something moving. How many tens of thousands of miles per hour at something else? How many light years away? Like moving at how many? It's.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
literally, the stars got to align, or the
yeah.
rocks got to align, I guess.
So I don't like so my lens is 500 millimeters. That's my longest lens. So I think that shot with the moon in between, I think that's like at 400 or something. So I'm not even fully because I wanted you to see the whole island sort of.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that does help too. And I like how it's a little thicker on one side than the other. That
yeah,
love that,
yeah.
man.
So you can see it's like but the when you are fully zoomed in on the moon and waiting for it to hit your spot, you can see it moving like fast, like
That
really
is wild.
moving, and you're like, oh my god. So it's also fun. I don't know where, but I think I posted. I have some. Took some sort of video, or I took time lapse photos of the moon. Some of my posts have like some time lapse. I love doing that too. It doesn't always work out perfectly, but I have some software that knits it together smoothly, and you can just like kind of watch the moon rise.
I
But
just
it's
had
all
either a great idea or a terrible idea. For like, I love doing gallery walls in my house with photographs. You know, sometimes you see like like a circle and it has the moon and the different stages of
different
the moon.
phases.
Like, what if you took like a bunch of photographs in different stages of the moon and like didn't arrange them so they were all perfect? Like you don't set up the photos so the moon is all in the same place, but you set up the finite frame so they are so they're all kind of off centered, but there's a circle of how the moon goes around it. That might look awesome,
Yeah,
or it
that's
might
cool.
look terrible.
That is an interesting idea too. Um, yeah, that could be cool. It kind of even in the same place where you can kind of see to get the phases, get as many phases as you can as close to the foreground. Like I like foreground stuff because it
Mhm.
gives you an idea of like where the moon is and its size. Um, like like you see a lot of photos of eclipses, and you just see the moon, because a lot of times you're seeing an eclipse, it's like so far above, you know, the ground that you can't
Yeah.
really get foreground. So I'm actually next October. There's an annular solar eclipse, which means the moon doesn't quite cover the entirety of the sun. Like there's a ring around it,
Yeah.
so that's it passes through the Midwest. I'm going to visit a friend, and it's actually a fairly early eclipse out west. It's like 8 a.m., so it shouldn't be too high, and so we're gonna have some foreground that we're trying to figure out where to take the photo. So we're in the planning stages of a photo that we're gonna take in like
So
six
cool.
months.
Here's a quick sidebar, and I know people have mentioned this before, but what do you think like prehistoric man thought when they saw an eclipse? Like, how long would they be talking about that? Like, in the absence of television and communication, it's like, do you think the gods are angry? I mean, you'd be talking about that forever,
Yeah,
especially because you'd be blind.
well, I can't because I've never seen an eclipse. I've never been there, but just seeing like video of it, it must have been freaking frightening. I mean, can
Right,
you imagine you're like walking around perfectly sunny day, like no clouds in the sky, and all of a sudden the lights go out for up to like 4 or 5 minutes?
right. And then it never happens, like, or like,
Yeah.
happens like 5 years later or something. Like,
Well, then you see like the crescent. You think, like, what is that? Yeah, of
you would
course.
make up the craziest stories as to why that happened.
Yeah. But then what's amazing is before they even had any real technology, they could predict when a
Yeah,
lot of it would happen, which is crazy. I mean, I use an app. I love like, that tells me where even just like a regular monthly full moon, it tells me
yeah,
exactly when it's gonna rise, so I can set up somewhere. But like, there's a little bit of play to it, so you gotta like find a spot. It's funny. Often when I go out, there's other photographers there, and like you see a guy like 40 yards like to the right. You're like, is that the right spot? You're like, nah, he's screwed. Like, because
so
we're
that makes that it's funny because like when you're in these solid, I remember I had a friend of a friend who was a professional poker player, and I remember asking him like just out of curiosity, what is the relationship like with the other players? Because it's like you're traveling to the same places, you're probably seeing each other in airports, but like you're trying to take each other's money. And he said, yeah, it is very weird. You have these little friendships that are friendships, but not really friendships. And in rapping, it's kind of the same way, where it's like you have your close friends that are rapping, but everybody else is sort of just someone else that like you kind of want to, totally body on a song. So what is it like when you're out in the wild with other photographers?
I always, because like I'm not like, there's a competition, I think, to get the spot if you're doing like a moon photo. But it's funny because it's mostly older gentlemen, older women who are kind of retired and just have the time for this now. Um, and so I just chat with them. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah. Throw their camera in the water and like spit on them and say, this is my town.
Yeah, but it's funny. Did you hear that? Somebody's banging on it. Anyway, it's funny. You should say that because I was with the marathon last week. I saw some interviews with all the Kenyans who train together.
Yep. I grew up in Hopkinton, so I know the marathon
Yeah,
very
yeah.
well. Yep.
So they were being asked, like, yeah, you guys all train together and you're friends, but at what point um,
Yeah.
in the race do you become competitors? And like, they couldn't really. They're like, it just whoever decides. There's just a point where somebody is like, oh, I'm gonna win this one. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's interesting.
It
It's
is
fun.
it's sort of like it's beautiful in the way that like so much of our life is planned, but then these little moments where you just have to be ready for them and it's not planned. It's like, you know, I don't know. It's and then there's also that, how mad can you be when your teammate wins, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's I think what I like about like that's not my type of photography, but like just capturing the unplanned, like that photo of the kid going by,
Mhm.
like that was completely. Those are my favorite types of photographs. My favorite photographers are street photographers who just capture these moments that like will never be caught again.
Right.
Somebody jumping over a puddle or like these famous photos. But it's just really that's my favorite type of photography. Even though I that's not really what I do, but it's my
Yeah.
favorite to.
All right. So one thing I keep thinking I want to bring up here is as a public service to everybody who's ever tried to take a picture of a beautiful sunset on their iPhone and ended up with absolute garbage. Can you and hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot, can you explain to people why that is and like what they would need to do to actually get a decent photograph of like the sunset or the moon or something on a fairly standard, like not like a huge like a lens or anything like that?
Yeah. So what I would suggest doing, I think what happens is people want to see like the big ball,
Mhm.
and on a phone, like I've got an iPhone, so you get the little, but you get the wide lens, you get the standard lens, which is like 40 or 50 millimeters. The wide's like 26, and then the the 3x lens, which is like I don't know 100, so it's like a little bit of a zoom. When I'm trying to take like a photo on my phone that I want to look close to, like if it's like landscape, I just do the zoom in right away. Um, and I try to reduce if it's a sunset. I take as much. There's like a little thing you can drop the light. Like it's going to be too bright. These phones. The aperture is like almost wide open. It's like f2.8. So aperture is the size of the iris. There's all kinds of
How
math,
much
but
light is you're letting in for how
lower
long?
the number, the more light that is coming in.
Right.
So it's like I think you can get apps where you can like shoot at f16, which is like like a really tight and everything's in focus. But most of the time when you're just whipping your phone out, you're taking the photo, it's like f2 or 3, or like
Right.
so
And one
slow.
thing too, for people who don't know, the wider your aperture is open, the more important it is that your camera is stable. Because
Yeah,
because that
yeah.
means that like you're letting all this light in, but also you're taking the photograph over a longer period of time. So if you move it, it becomes blurry.
Yeah, like for example when you hear somebody talk about a fast lens is f2.8 or lower f1, like so there's lenses that are zoom lenses, and those can go down to around f2.8, and then there are prime lenses which are even sharper and can go down to like f1 or lower, which is crazy, but they're super, so the wider the aperture, the shallower the depth of field.
Right.
So, so that's a whole other thing. But
Yeah, depth
anyways,
of
yeah, if you're
field's a
taking
pain in the ass sometimes.
that's a whole other. Yeah, you got to really
It's the
just
if you ever watch a baseball game and just look at the way like it is great when the way they're able to photograph a pitcher and have it look like you're right up next to them and then see the bat. It's tough. They had to really plan that out.
yeah, right, yeah, and yeah, you get that nice, like the better the lens, the nice, like if the foreground is in focus, whatever you're taking a photo of is in focus, and the back is like kind of that
Right.
creamy,
Because
soft.
if in those instances, if the pitcher stepped like 3 feet back or 3 feet forward, they'd be I'm assuming almost totally blurred out. Because because of the distance they're shooting from, how close you're seeing them, they probably only have the width of the mound to really move around and stay in focus.
Probably, depending on what they're shooting at, and usually with the lighting in stadiums, they get plenty of light, so they
Oh,
can
that's
see.
true. Yeah. But I
So
mean, if it's not, even when I said it's not exactly true, that's generally
yeah,
the what
yeah.
we're talking about. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So I just recommend when you're taking. I actually with phones, if I was taking a sunset photo, I would wait until the sun is set, like wait until like 10 or 15 minutes after the sun is set. And the best days to take photos of sunsets is when there's clouds. When there's no clouds, it's like kind of useless. It's nothing to
Right.
look at. Um, when there's clouds, and then you get those reds and pinks and oranges, just take a photo of that, because you don't need to see the sun is going to be too bright for your phone.
Right. And it's one thing too. It's like when you think about, I'm taking a picture of my cat who's 4 feet away from me. It's like, you're taking a picture of the sun. That's how many feet away? Like, I mean, it's like if I take a picture of my neighbor's house, that may be like, 50, 100 feet away from me. But it's
Yeah,
like, we're talking about like thousands and tens and thousands and I don't even know how many millions of feet the
yeah,
moon is away, but it's far. I
yeah,
haven't been there.
yeah. I think just wait till there's clouds. I mean, for me, it's great because like I live in the Northeast, and I can go to the ocean, and there's usually clouds, you
Yeah.
know, sun setting behind or whatever. And I can go to places where I can actually look over the ocean, even though it's to the east. There's little things that jet out. I can look to the west and actually see a sunset where there's clouds and get some decent shots. So I have there's a couple shots um, on my Instagram that are just like post actually sunset photos that I really like. It's just the sky. It's just kind of abstract almost.
Yeah. This one, and God, this is a beautiful photo. I don't know how well this is like the worst way to look at something, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this photo is just gorgeous, man.
Okay,
And
so that
I'll cover the screen so you don't see my phone holding it up. But it's a moon coming over a snow-covered house. It's a blue moon setting over Salem this morning. Happy Halloween.
yeah,
Oh, this is
that
on, you shot this on Halloween. Holy crap.
yes, I did, and
Snow-covered Halloween.
that's the Hocus Pocus house in Salem.
Oh, really? As in that related to the movie Hocus Pocus
Yeah.
that I just saw for the first time a few months ago?
So from the original movie, that's the house like they lived in, and it's still there. And some like old lady I think lives there. So don't go to the house, but because I think
Because she's a witch. Can we get you on record as saying that she's a witch? Okay, got
but
it.
the angle I
That's
took
going in the promo.
yeah, yeah. Well, the nice thing about that photo is I've been waiting a long time to get that photo. I wanted to get it obviously close to the house, but there's trees behind it. But the trees actually helped. It made it like kind of glow through the trees. So that
It's
is the
it's
sun.
the moon is nested right there. It's like when you see like the the balls on people's front lawn sitting on something. It's just nested there, man.
And it's that's the moon setting because
And the
I'm
moon,
looking.
yeah, I think it's at the sun.
Yeah, no, no, but that's the moon setting because I'm looking west now to get that photo. Fortunately, when there's a full moon, um, the tide is usually out. So I'm out where when there's like a regular tide, I'd be underwater. So I'm way out, kind of in the middle of the ocean, with and my toes were free. I remember it was very cold, um, and I had to
Let me just
wait
point
until
out, if you were to learn about the way the moon moves to do your art, then yeah, you're an artist and you're kind of a scientist.
a little bit, a little bit. I have an app that helps, but I had to get to the right spot, and I was like sinking into the sand because I'm like out in the middle. But yeah, that was a I love that because
This is a really beautiful photo.
wanted that house in it.
Because you know
So
what's interesting is like this somehow captures, like I said before, about how your photos can be both like seen as very artistic and also as soothing. This really captures both of those
yeah,
because it's a little off-centered. The moon is in a position that you don't usually see it like feeling like it's just being cradled there. And I love the little blurry part in the bottom. Is that a snowbank?
it's a rocks.
Okay.
So it's
It's
rocks that
so beautiful against the crispness of the moon.
yeah, yeah. It's rocks that are like usually underwater.
Oh,
That
cool.
like I was like I had like when I finally got the shot, like the tide was starting to come in, and I was soaked and cold. Yeah, that was a cool shot.
Man.
That was the
This is a really
coolest.
beautiful photograph. I mean, I think, especially too, and I'm glad I mentioned this one, that Hocus Pocus is, like I said, I just saw it for the first time. Very charming movie. You know, maybe I would have loved it if I saw it as a kid, but I
Yeah,
appreciated it. There's a lot of people who love that movie.
I
I
know.
think would love this photo too. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
it's
it's like I took it because it's a little gimmicky, but I always wanted that house in one of my shots, and with the moon, I was like, oh, this is so cool.
oh
So
yeah. But it's I would say this is the least gimmicky photo you could take of a house like that. It's all even like this one too, the House of Seven Gables one. It's like there was,
yeah,
the house was there, but you added way more to it. Like
yeah,
you brought something, commented on it in a way.
yeah.
Man,
Um,
that's gorgeous.
it's funny. I'm glad you're reminded because like I don't even think about them a lot. Now I'm thinking back to like I'm like, wow, I did do a lot.
I like this Steve's Quality Market one too. What is
Oh,
it about Salem? Because like what I love about the one I mentioned before with the bike, the fact that the place is named Joe's Hair Salon, which
yeah,
like I don't is there I mean there's Joe's Pizza, there's Joe everything. I don't know how many Joe's hair salons are out there, but the fact that it's that is perfect. And Steve's Quality Market, like what is the
yeah.
story behind this one?
So that I lived right near there, and I used to use that market all the time. And it's one of those like old school, like little corner markets that's still got the lights. It's probably been there since like the 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
It's neon lights, and what I did so that I've taken a lot of photos of that that building, but it had rain, so you get the reflection in the street, which is awesome. I love
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
So
I was looking at the other one. Now I'm looking at the one I think
yeah,
you're talking about. Yeah, this is cool. This reminds me of that famous diner photo. It has that, it evokes that same imagery.
kind of like Nighthawks, which I
Yeah,
love.
yeah, and like kind of an eyes wide shot when he's walking around the city, and it looks just like, a
Yes.
different version of New York.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just how it looks to me all the time. And I think people have seen it like that. So that photo is a little more raw. I love that. The other one I'm talking about, which is like a few days later, I think I probably took them both on the same night. Um, it was a long exposure and a truck drove by, and you could see that light that goes it almost underlines the Steves.
Yep.
That was just the light from a truck. It just perfectly underlined Steve's phone.
Wow.
So there was a truck drove by as I took like a 20-second exposure.
When you post these three photos that slide together into one, are those really just three photos you chopped up perfectly and put them up, or is there a different way of doing that?
Yeah, no, it's a single photo, and then to post, I have an app that like helps you do that.
Oh,
So
okay,
it's one
cool.
photo, and then it cuts it perfect so that you can slide through it.
Okay, so I could just do that in Photoshop and just cut it because I've seen that, and I think Trespassing did some of those too. I'm like, ooh, I gotta figure out how to do that
Yeah,
because
there's
it looks really cool. And then the last photo, I hadn't seen that last photo before. Man, I love that.
yeah, yeah. There's like an app that just does it. I just do it on my phone. It's cool though.
Yeah,
It's funny because what I like about doing that is like the last one is the full photo, and the first three just give you the detail. It's like I
right.
just oh, here's some detail. Like look how detailed it is, and then
Because I mean, I responded to the first three without even seeing that reflection in the bottom. That really does add a lot to it when you get it in
yeah,
full frame.
that's cool.
It is. You're definitely like when you think about just the photographs that we probably grew up with of seeing in the 50s, like the Nighthawks one. I mean, that's a is that a painting or a photograph? I can't
The
remember.
pain.
It's painting, yeah. Um, like this does capture that part of like I'm sort of obsessed sometimes going back and looking at what like Route 9 in Framingham looked like when I was a kid and prior to that. And you
Yeah,
do realize how much the landscape has changed. And this is the old like when you look at the Steve's Quality Meat market, this is old and new at the same time. Like
yeah,
it,
yeah.
it
I love that.
captures a lot about what New England is, the
Sure.
old and the new, and trying to like, and we live in a state that I think people see as being very liberal, but there are a lot of we have a lot of Republican governors here. There are a lot of conservative people here,
Yeah,
and we're a state that sort of does straddle two lines between the conservatives and the liberals and the old and the new, but probably does it a little more peacefully than some of the states.
I
But
think so.
but then again, I'm more liberal, and I think we're probably outnumbered a little bit. So I'm sure the other side might say differently.
Yeah,
But this is something that sort of connects us, like, and that's what I love about your pieces. They sort of say something, but I do feel like they connect people. They ground people to the New England that we know and love.
yeah, that's cool. I it's funny that when you mentioned, do you have time for one more like little?
I mean, I haven't had nothing but time, man. This is the last thing I got to do today.
When it's funny, I haven't even looked at that photo in a while, and you brought it up, and you're like, oh, it's like that painting, and it reminded me of Nighthawks, which is that one, that late night like cafe on the corner, and people are
Yeah,
doing. Anyway, so one of the things that really motivated me to take photos, I'm a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino films.
of course. That's
And
one of the reasons I went to film school was Reservoir Dogs, Clerks, and Kids. The three
yeah,
movies that have the biggest influence on me.
yeah, and so one, it's funny, I can kind of pinpoint the time, the image that really made me want to take photos, and it's at the beginning of Pulp Fiction when Honey Bunny is pointing her gun,
Yeah,
okay, or his, and he's pointing his gun, and those
I
fleeting.
think I know where you're going. I just saw this.
I've always wanted when it freezes right
Yeah,
before the birds come up. I've always wanted that print on my wall. I've never
yeah,
figured out how to get it. Uh, Someday I'll figure it out and put it on the wall. But it's just such a cool shot. Like he uses forget the guy's name, but his cinematographers are like second to none. And those guys, they're basically trained photographers that frame these perfect images. And anyway, the other day I was looking up some artists. I forget the guy's name, but he just happened to, I don't know. You know how you Google people? Like I
yeah.
was Googling somebody, this famous person, and her husband was an artist, and I Googled him, and an image came up, and it was um, the Nighthawks painting,
Yep.
but with Honey Bunny with the gun, and it was
I
it was
just saw that in the past week or two as well. I was blown away by it. I love. That's so weird that we both saw it.
It's such a great image. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that is so I love the combination of the painting and
I was like
film.
one of those damn I wish I thought of that moments, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, very cool. That's awesome. I'm glad you saw that because it's that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I wonder where I saw that because I definitely saw it and responded to my screenshot of it, but it's so random that you like happen to, the internet's a big place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think, what do you want to do with your photography? I mean, you're obviously tremendously talented. I know you've sold stuff in the past. Like, you're probably like a lot of us that have regular jobs. I know your job can be, you have to travel around a lot. It's hard to sort of the challenge for me over the years was, do I either make the art or try to make a business out of the art? But it's really hard to do both. And it wasn't until I was working from home full time and had this nifty difty little studio that I can sit in, like, that I actually can make time to do both. So what in an ideal world, what do you think you would want to take this in the next few years, and what would be like your biggest ambition with your photography if the stars
That's a good
aligned right?
No, that's a good question. Okay, so when I started this, it wasn't like I was like kind of serious, and then I got like more serious. I started buying equipment, and I started doing things for people. Um, I did sell a couple prints. I actually did a wedding once, which I hated, by the way, because there's so much pressure.
Yeah. I
But
mean, it's the worst DJ gig, it's the worst photographer gig, it's the worst everything, worst florist gig.
yeah, fortunately, I wasn't the only photo. I was like, they're like, here, you like, they had like a main photographer who knew how to like do wedding photography. And they're like, you just like take whatever you want, which was fun because I was like,
Right.
I
Yeah,
like
that is probably the best. Yeah.
dancing, all that stuff. So that's what I did, which was great. But I was like, never again. Because I knew the people too, and I was like, I kind of want to just
Right.
enjoy it. I've done portraits of people, which is interesting. It's just all it was all a kind of a learning experience. But I realized the second for me, this is just for me, for this particular thing, the second I started making it sort of a job, I put way too much pressure on myself, and
Same.
I wasn't having fun.
Yep.
And
It sucks the fun out of it. And it's like, yeah.
so like I, I would love if there was like if I could just do portraits maybe, and I don't know, but for me, I'd like to kind of get back into what I was doing with Salem Weather, maybe just start a new um, like a new Instagram or some other thing, and just like start up again and try to do a year straight and take photos every day. I think that's really important, even though I get busy. Um, and I want to start traveling with my camera more, even if it's just like a smaller version. That's another thing. When I travel for work, I can't bring all this equipment, and I don't want to,
Right. Yeah.
So take more photos be just more aware when I have time of what's around me, and try to take like better photos on the road. When I'm not just traveling for photography, when I'm traveling for work, I just try to I just forget about that side. But I'm like, I'm here, I might as well
Right.
do it.
I mean, because you might find that wherever weird not I won't say weird, whatever like random to us Midwest place you're in, there might be like, the largest yarn ball and whatever, like a mile from your hotel. And it's like, I
You're
don't
not
mean to make that sound like it's like I'm shitting on that. I do think that's cool and I would go see that and I'd probably buy a t-shirt. But
right, right.
like,
Yeah.
that might be a great photo opportunity you couldn't get elsewhere.
Well, and there's places. Yeah, and I'm like you say, like I'm out in the Midwest. I'm not gonna mention exactly where, but I'm in these places where I'll probably never go again,
Mhm.
and I'm surprised by them. Like, oh, I never thought this place was like this. Like this reminds me of home, and it's like middle of nowhere. Like literally, it feels like middle of nowhere.
Which is a good reminder in these times because I think as we're living in multiple different Americas here, the opportunity to go and see, oh, this place isn't so much different from us,
Right,
regardless of how it looks in the news.
right. So yeah, so I actually what I'd like to do is really just kind of not like I've lately I feel like I've taken too much time off of actual photography. Like it hasn't been the focus for me lately, and that it's kind of sad. Like I just want like I kind of have to push myself to make time for it
Let me
now.
give you
And
some good news on that. I have a lot of hobbies, every single time I've taken off tons of time on it and thought I could never do it again. When I come back, there's a little bit of rust, but then I'm twice as good.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
and
like
then
I think you'll have the same experience where it's like once you get in the groove, you'll be like, how did I learn all this stuff without doing it? But you
yeah,
will.
yeah. No, that's good to hear. Yeah, because I feel it. Like I still feel it. Like I get out and I do shots, but like I want it to be part of my day again, and that's sort of my goal for the future. Just make
Well,
it.
one thing about your art too, so a lot of people, like I run into this myself. A lot of people I know that are artists, they don't make stuff that's marketable. It's like they make stuff that like, like this Gambit piece, a lot of people have liked it, but for the effort I put into, it would have to charge a lot, and there's a pretty limited amount of people who are going to want to
Yeah,
spend that much for a piece they
yeah.
spent 60 hours on. Your stuff is very marketable. And I think, especially like if you think about Salem, the number of tourists that come through, the number of little shops in there that sell stuff. I mean, I think that I'm here. I am putting the pressure on you to turn into a
No, no,
business,
no.
but like,
It's not a bad like because I've got sometimes I don't know. Like it's funny. I have friends in Salem that run shops and have put my photos out and they've sold and things like that. But I never know what to give them. I'm like that. That's what I got to figure out. I'm like, oh, is this the most marketable photo? Like
yeah,
they should just it's funny, or I should just give them a bunch of different. What I did was I chose I think 5 photos and I printed multiples of each. And now I realize I should just print one or two of every photo and just say, somebody will
yeah.
find what they like in
Right.
there.
And also too, I mean, Instagram tells you which one get the most like. And I know it's not always
Sure.
reliable because
That's a
like
good,
the algorithm changes, but it's like, I mean, there's a reason that one that the one we talked about, the Hocus Pocus house, had like 400 and something likes. And it's like,
yeah.
and I'm looking at this one now that I love too. I mean, that's another gorgeous one,
Oh yeah, that's from
the
the market.
Witches Museum. And you got the cars going by. So even when you take like the busyness of the street, I assume those are car lights going by, it gets reduced down to, an image or a blur and something more minimal, which is
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah, I like that. I love that one too. It's fun. I'm glad you reminded me because I do. I take the photos, I put them in there, and I just forget.
This one too, I'd be curious, like if you look at the reflection is so cool, it almost works upside down. Like,
Yeah,
you could cut off this and that alone would be really cool.
Ben's. I forget. I've posted photos where I posted them upside down because the water was so still that
Yeah.
you could gave it a little eerie kind of effect.
Do you think most photographers start off by accidentally taking a really good picture and then not being able to stop looking at it? Because I feel like for everything I've done, I've kind of started doodling or something, and then all of a sudden something came out that I was like, whoa, where'd that come from? And then I just was like, then
Yeah.
eventually I'm like, is one more step. It can be a little bit, did
Yeah,
you have a
well,
similar experience? Because I remember we went to college together. I don't remember you being a photographer in college.
no, it was like I always felt like I always loved it. I was like, oh, I would love to do that. I don't and I don't know what kept me from doing it. Like I feel like it wasn't like my family stopped me from doing it, but I grew up in a family. It was like, you know, you go to school, you get a job. It's like
Right.
art really wasn't part of what we
And
what.
cameras are more expensive and film develop. It's like everything was a bigger pain. I mean, obviously we're young. We're
Yeah.
talking about like when we were in our early 20s. Like everything was probably about 5 to 10 times more of a pain in the ass.
Yes.
As
And
someone, I went to film school the year after I graduated. They moved to digital. When I was there, I was literally snipping and taping stuff together.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. See, and that's interesting to me too, because when I really finally got into like photography, everything is digital. And, talking to people who either still shoot film or started shooting film and are now digital, it is a completely different thing. It's completely different. A lot of people think digital is cheating. I don't think it is. I think it's a completely different art than
Right.
than than film. Um, I
It's sort
do.
of one of those when people say that, it's sort of like people like, oh, you should be recording on tape and not Pro Tools. And you're just like, well,
It
okay,
doesn't
it's right. It's a little bit of like, look, Oprah, like if everybody could afford your chefs, we could all look so good. It's
Yeah, I mean it's a whole different. Well, I remember. So I would when I did take some photography lessons from a guy, and he was telling me when he first started, like one of his first jobs after he had learned photography, was weddings, and he would get I think enough film to shoot 128 shots or something like that, and you had to guarantee 100. Can you imagine? Yeah, so it's nuts. Like to me, because like
ugh.
you can talk to photographers who have been doing this for 30 years and or longer and they'll tell you like these are photographers that take like landscape or whatever you have to take, it's like one out of a
Right.
thousand. The good they feel good about and is a good photo. Um, like, or you
And
get
part
lucky.
of the talent is knowing that 1 out of 1,000. That's where a lot of the talent comes from.
Yeah,
Is not only this. It's like it's the setup, but the afterwards and having the eye.
right. But it's all, yeah, but it's not like some people hear that and they're like, oh, I can go take 1,000 photos of whatever.
Nah, nah,
That's not true. You have to know the
right.
light, where you're looking, and
One
it,
step rolls into the next.
yeah, and you could be, I could be shooting nonstop at something, and but you got to find that one shot where everything was perfect.
Photo burst mode on your iPhone doesn't get you there. I mean, you might get lucky sometimes, but it doesn't. It's not.
The only time I use photo burst is like now, every once in a while when I go out to try to take photos of like birds, any
Right.
wildlife.
To try to catch something at the, because
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, um, yeah. I feel for, like, when you see really amazing film shots, like you wonder, like now that everybody has digital cameras, like they can pretty much catch anything. Like everything's
right.
kind of captured, like what it was like back then when you really had to be hyper focused on every little thing just to get the shot, and be able to see it. Like, oh, if my, if I had, if it was too long exposure, underexposed or overexposed, you're screwed. Like you had to be right on. Now my camera pretty much tells me. I'm shooting in manual because it's better,
Right.
but like, the camera, there's so much going on in the camera. It's telling me whether the image is gonna come out like
Right.
decent.
There's one thing too about everybody having a camera is the camera can do a lot of the technical work, but it can't teach you how to frame, and it
Well,
can't. And it's like, so like a truly great photograph like tells a story, or and that is one thing that the camera itself isn't going to be able to do. The framing tells a story, the composition tells a story, and then too, if you're an artistic photographer, understanding that um some elements should be crisp, some should be blurred out, and making choices rather than being
yeah,
like, oh, I accidentally shot this.
yeah, that's the first thing I notice about like a really good shot. It's like, wow, that's really well framed. It's just you're looking through a window into this one moment that'll never happen again. You know what I mean? It's just kind of very cool how people choose to frame their shots, and whether they're following a rule of thirds or any of that, or those leading lines. Sometimes you just get lucky.
Right.
I mean, even real professional photographers like get lucky, but that's part of it too. Like I could go around, take photos all day and not realize I've taken a great photo until later. So
Yes, that's a wonderful feeling.
because you're like, oh wow, look at the way this is pointing this way and this line, and the shadow falls, and you're like, oh wow, there, that works. I didn't even realize. I took the photo maybe somewhere in the back of my mind at the time. I knew it was going to be okay, but you don't know till after, and that, I think that's part of it too. It's fun.
Well, here's a weird question I just thought of. All right, so you live in Salem. I'm not going to get into, whether ghosts and all that stuff is real. But
Yeah,
have you ever taken a photo around town where you looked back on it and you're like, I don't know what that is? Because I've had a few people, I had this idea for a documentary a few years ago about, over the course of my life, people have told me some pretty convincing ghost stories. And I'm somebody who's sort of like, ghosts could be true, could not be true. I had this lunchbox that kept doing something weird in my office the past 6 months, so it's got me thinking. But people have showed me some kind of weird photos, and had these stories. People that are pretty reputable otherwise.
yeah.
So I always think about that. Ever any encounters like that?
Okay. Never in Salem. Um, I've never had any like encounters or where I took a photo and I saw something weird in it. I have met people, and we both went to BU.
Yeah.
I roomed with your friend, and
Drummer
Dan.
from Microwave Sushi, Dan Bazzola. I'll have to tell you about that later.
Okay, I need to
He's
know more
drumming
about.
like a maniac now. It's awesome.
Really? Oh God, I gotta get in contact. But it's one night. I think I told him this. This is crazy. So we were on Buzzwell Street. Do you remember Buzzwell Street?
All too well.
I was home. He was not home. Um, I had out for the night, had a few drinks, came home, fell asleep on the sofa, woke up to what I thought was a person coming through the door, and I remember vividly. And this is gonna make me sound insane because I'm not like a ghost person, but this is the only experience I've ever had where I'm like, is this a ghost? I I look, there's just a little light coming through the window behind me, and all but the lights are out, and the light coming through the door. Like the door to me actually opened. Could have been dreaming. I don't know. I see a girl in a white t-shirt and shorts coming toward me, and then I was like, "Hello, Dan." Hello, and I thought it was somebody else, and nobody was there. Well, no, she didn't say anything. Came toward me. I freaked out. Turned around. There was a light behind me. Turned the light on quick and turned back, and nobody was there. The
God.
door was closed. Okay, and so now I'm freaking out. I'm like, like, wow, I wasn't that drunk. I was just, So then I don't sleep. It's like 3 in the morning. Don't sleep. Next day, I think I probably told Dan, but I looked into it. And it was like, and I remember details about her. She was blonde, this and that. And then come to find out, some blonde girl had died in that building years
Oh
ago.
my
Like
God.
she looked like she was a Monica Club. So that freaked me out. I don't know what to think, but that's a legit experience I've had.
It's
And I
funny. The reason I love these stories is not because like I'm gonna sit here and judge whether what happened to you is exactly what you said, but like you had an experience and we don't
yeah,
know what caused that experience. Like I
no,
don't think you had a mental break. I don't think it's like I don't know what like but I believe you experienced what you said you
yeah,
did, but I don't know how to explain it. And it's like to say it's like to say that you experienced what you experienced doesn't necessarily say it's a ghost, but something weird.
right, exactly. I still don't,
Even
and
if
I'm not.
even if it was in your head just doing a weird dream thing, it's still fucking interesting.
The coincidence of all of it was weird because, like, I don't think I researched it, but I told somebody in the building, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's the ghost or something." I'm like, "No, it isn't." And then they told me this story, and I was like, they described the person, and I was like, "That's what it looked like."
Yeah,
So it kind of freaked me out. So that will always stick with me because it was a very strange night. Yeah.
it is wild. My documentary, the idea was that how did this experience you had with the supernatural change you? Like you would think that if something happened to you that you really believed that it was something that was not of this world and of the world we knew, you would think your life would never be the same. But what I found out from most people when I chatted them about it is that they didn't. They just sort of incorporated it into their life and moved on. In which I mentioned before, I had this thing. We were talking about this lunchbox before. Um, I came into my office twice over the past several months, and one of these metal hooks was just unhooked. Now this is like steel. Like
Not easy to know those. Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to get this off, and literally they were just detached, and it was hard to get it back on. A couple
Slowly.
other weird things happened, but this is like the only one I couldn't explain at all.
That's
And
weird.
I don't know what like could have possibly happened. And it's only two people living here, and it wasn't my girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah, that is strange.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've had any other encounters like that like unexplained. I don't think. But that one always sticks out in my head. It
it's
was
pretty
just
wild. It's just it's I don't know, stuff like that is great. So I don't know anything else. So I guess we'll be getting close to wrapping up here. Anything else you want to talk about, or any other photography stories
um,
you got, or
I don't really well, oh, I'll quickly tell you about I had a photography teacher that I found
oh
online.
yes, I meant that's I knew there was something I wanted to go back to. Yeah.
Just a quick story. It was just so I started taking photos. Then I got a camera. I'm trying to be self-taught, which I basically was, and watched a lot of YouTube videos. There's a lot of great people that make these videos that really you can get a lot of free
Oh
lessons,
yeah.
which was great. But I still wasn't quite sure what I was doing. Saw this guy had these classes in town, went and signed up for the class, and I was the only one, or I think there were like two people in the class. And eventually, people just stopped showing up. He's kind of like an old hippie, very cool guy. Um, Kind of just ended up just hanging out with him. Um, Whenever he was like, yeah, just come by whenever. I paid for the classes, but ended up going way more and just kind of learning from his experiences and the way he took very artistic photos like models and things like that, and it wasn't my thing, but I learned so much about light and shadow and what to look for and leading lines, and he just taught me all that stuff that like I had no clue. And then the biggest lesson from the whole thing was, oh yeah, by the way, don't follow any of those rules. Just like find things that you like. But the most important thing I learned from him was framing. You gotta get closer. You always have to get closer than you think.
Mhm.
Even though a lot of my photos are farther away, I'm
You
like
can only get
really
so close to the moon.
I'm really working on framing so that's I don't want certain things in the way or distracting at the edges of the photos. I want you to know what you're supposed to look at, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I went for him. And he was pretty cool. I actually I ended up paying him in weed for like half of it. Because like I remember I was like, "Can I take your class again?" I said, "I have friends that like to come." He goes, "Oh yeah," you know, and then that's what he took for payment, which was which was amazing.
Welcome to Massachusetts.
Yeah, and yeah, and then I don't know what happened to him. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's I mean, that's where it's like you can get inspiration from almost anybody. It's like I have people that are probably only slightly further ahead in their artistic journey than I am that that I get a lot of inspiration from. It's just a matter of engaging with people and learning what you can. It's
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
being part of a community is huge.
Yeah, yeah, and that was fun too. Like some friends that were local that came and took the class, then we'd all go out sometimes and take photos together. That was fun too. For me, I prefer going out on my own because it's just sort of a relaxing thing for me.
Yeah.
But going out with other people and kind of helping them out, like, oh, how do I do this setting or whatever, I like that aspect of it.
That's a tricky thing that and we'll wrap up in a second, but sometimes I look at when I go to like a Comic-Con and I see all these 15, 16-year-old, you know, girls dressed as like Deadpool and stuff like that. And I'm like, you did not exist when I was a kid. And like no matter what it was geeky thing that we were into when we were like in high school, whatever, we maybe were lucky if we had one or two people who liked it as well. And everybody who's into like the sports, they make their sports friends almost for life. And like once we get out and finally have, you know, it's affordable for us to do these things, you do have to go find your new friends that do these things also and learn from them. It's
Right.
and it's tough for people who are artists who maybe are naturally extroverted, but it does the having it be having a community, you're gonna come along so much faster. And you can always, you know, recede back and do your own thing, but just having the connection to others, you're gonna learn things so much
You learn
quicker.
a lot. You learn a lot from
Yeah.
friends.
So cool,
Cool.
man. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Salem Weather on Instagram. Follow him, hit him up, and make him sell you some prints because these are amazing. Yeah, absolutely beautiful work, man. It's been a pleasure talking
Thank
to you
you.
today.
Thanks, Tim.
Cool, man. I'll talk to you.